They told me never to acknowledge the hikers who wear all white after sunset. That was Rule 7, written in faded ink at the bottom of a list I found tucked inside my ranger manual on my first day. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, and someone had tried to tear it out. I wish they'd succeeded. My name is Sarah Chen, and in the spring of 1995, I became a park ranger for a remote section of the Appalachian Trail in southwestern Virginia. I was 26, fresh out of my forestry degree, idealistic as hell, and convinced I was going to make a difference protecting America's wilderness. I had no idea that some things in these mountains don't need protecting. They need to be left the hell alone. The ranger station was a squat wooden building that smelled like pine sap and old coffee. My supervisor, a grizzled man named Frank Whitmore, who looked like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves, handed me the standard materials on my first day. Radio protocols, emergency procedures, wildlife guidelines, maps with the trail sections marked in red pencil. Then he paused, his weathered hand hovering over a green folder that sat apart from the others. "There's one more thing," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Rules we don't put in the official manual." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 rules typed on what must have been a very old typewriter. The letters slightly crooked, some filled in with ink. I read them aloud, my voice echoing slightly in the small office. Rule 1, never follow music you hear after 10 p.m., no matter how beautiful. Rule 2, if you find boots arranged in a circle, call in immediately and leave the area. Do not disturb them. Rule 3, the trail markers only glow if you're being followed. Don't look behind you. Rule 4, if a hiker asks you to take their picture but you can't see them in the viewfinder, refuse politely and walk away. Rule 5, dead birds arranged in patterns are warnings. Heed them. Rule 6, if you hear your name called from the woods, it is never who you think it is. Rule 7, never acknowledge the hikers who wear all white after sunset. I looked up at Frank, half smiling, waiting for the punchline. This had to be some kind of hazing ritual for new rangers, but Frank wasn't smiling. "I know how it sounds," he said quietly. "I know exactly how it sounds. But Sarah, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me." He leaned forward and I saw something in his eyes I didn't like, something haunted. In 1982, we had a ranger named Michael Torres. Smart guy, experienced, didn't believe in nonsense. He was working the same section you'll be covering. One night in July, he radioed in that he'd encountered a group of hikers in white clothing near Dismal Falls. Said they were acting strange, not responding to him. He was going to approach them, make sure they were okay. Frank paused, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. We never heard from him again. Found his radio 2 days later, smashed to pieces. Found his boots a week after that, arranged in a circle with 6 others we couldn't identify. Never found Michael. His wife still calls sometimes, asking if there's been any news. I have to tell her no. The smile slid off my face. "What about the police, FBI?" "They investigated, found nothing." Officially, Michael Torres walked away from his life, abandoned his post, left his wife and 2 kids. But his truck was still here, Sarah. His wallet, his keys, family photos, all in his locker. The only thing missing was Michael. I felt a chill despite the warm spring air filtering through the window. "And you think these rules—" "I think," Frank interrupted, "that these mountains are old. Older than our country, older than the European settlements, older than the indigenous peoples who avoided certain places up here. I think there are things we don't understand, and maybe we're not meant to. And I think that following these rules, silly as they might seem, might be the difference between going home at the end of your shift and becoming another missing person statistic." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "You don't have to believe me. Hell, I'd probably respect you less if you just accepted it without question. But keep that list, and if you're smart, you'll follow it anyway, just in case." I took the list, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't believe in ghosts or cryptids or whatever Frank was implying haunted these woods. I believed in black bears, hypothermia, and hikers who got in over their heads. I believed in rational explanations. That belief lasted exactly 3 weeks, The first incident happened on a Tuesday night in late May. I was doing a routine evening patrol, checking on the campsites near the trail shelters. The sun had set about an hour earlier, and the forest was doing that thing it does at dusk, transforming from a friendly, filtered light wonderland into something primordial and indifferent. My flashlight beam cut through the gathering darkness, illuminating patches of ferns and the occasional startled deer. I heard the music around 9:30. At first, I thought someone had a radio. It was fiddle music, bright and cheerful, the kind of tune that makes you want to dance. But there was something off about it. The melody was too perfect, too crisp, like it was being played right next to my ear, even though it clearly came from deeper in the woods. I stopped walking, one hand instinctively going to the radio on my belt. Rule 1 flickered through my mind. Never follow music you hear after 10 p.m., no matter how beautiful. It wasn't 10 p.m. yet. Technically, I was fine. The music continued, and now I could hear laughter mixed in with it. Happy, genuine laughter, like people were having the time of their lives at some invisible party. And I have to be honest, I was curious. Part of being a ranger is checking on people, making sure they're following camping regulations, ensuring they're safe. If there was a group partying in the woods, I needed to make sure they weren't disturbing other hikers or creating a fire hazard. I started walking toward the music. The woods seemed to shift around me as I walked. The trees grew closer together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the stars. My flashlight beam seemed weaker somehow, like the darkness was pushing back against it. But the music grew louder, more enticing. I could almost make out words now, though they were in a language I didn't recognize. I checked my watch. 9:47 p.m. The music stopped. Just like that. Mid-note it cut off, and the silence that followed was so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. I stood there in the dark, my flashlight illuminating nothing but trees and underbrush, suddenly very aware that I had no idea where I was. I spun around, looking for the trail, for any landmark I recognized. Nothing. The trees all looked the same. My radio crackled with static when I tried to call in. And then I heard it. My own voice, calling from somewhere ahead of me. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm Ranger Chen. I'm here to help." It was my voice, my exact voice, with my inflection, my slight California accent that I'd never quite shaken. But I hadn't said those words. I was standing silent, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm Ranger Chen," my voice called again. "I heard music. Are you folks having a party?" Rule 6. If you hear your name called from the woods, it is never who you think it is. But this was different. This was my whole voice, my sentences, my identity being worn like a costume by something in these woods. I did the only sensible thing I could think of. I ran. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face, my flashlight bouncing wildly. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, or something that sounded like footsteps, but with too many feet, moving in a rhythm that wasn't quite right. And my voice, still calling out cheerfully, getting closer. "Wait, I just want to help. I'm Ranger Chen." I burst through a line of trees and stumbled onto the trail, recognizing the white blaze markers that glowed faintly in my flashlight beam. I stood there, gasping, and slowly turned around. The forest was quiet. Empty. Just trees and darkness. My radio crackled. "Chen, this is base. You missed your check-in. Everything okay out there?" I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. "Yeah, Frank, everything's fine. Just got distracted. Heading back now." "Copy that. And Chen?" "Yeah? What time is it?" I looked at my watch. 10:03 p.m. Just after 10. Why? There was a long pause. Then, "Get back here, now, and stay on the trail." I practically ran back to the station. Frank was waiting outside, a serious expression on his weathered face. He took one look at me, scratched, pale, shaking, and nodded slowly. "You heard it," he said, "not a question. The music." I heard music and I followed it, and then I stopped, not sure how to explain what had happened without sounding insane. "And then you heard something that shouldn't exist," Frank finished. "Come inside. Coffee's on." Over terrible burnt coffee, I told Frank everything. He listened without interrupting, his face grave. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're lucky," he finally said. Lucky. You looked at your watch. You stopped before 10. If you'd kept following that music after the hour turned. He shook his head. Well, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Frank, what the hell is out there? He stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a worn folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, old reports, and photographs. He spread them on the desk. 1967, 3 hikers disappear near this section. Their campsite is found undisturbed, food still cooking over a fire, sleeping bags laid out. No sign of struggle. One hiker's journal was left open. Last entry says, "The music is beautiful. We're going to find where it's coming from." 1973, a ranger named Patricia Vance reports hearing fiddle music at night. She follows protocol, doesn't investigate. 2 days later, hikers find a circle of 7 stones, each one carved with her name. She transfers to a different district. Smart woman. 1989, a couple camping near Dismal Falls records audio of what they describe as the most beautiful party music we've ever heard. The recording is nothing but static and what sounds like screaming, but they insist that's not what they heard in person. They cut their hike short. And those are just the incidents that got documented. Talk to the locals in the valleys, the people whose families have been here for generations, and they'll tell you about the music in the mountains. They'll tell you it's been here longer than anyone can remember. And they'll tell you that people who follow it don't come back the same, if they come back at all. I stared at the clippings, my rational mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This doesn't make sense. There has to be an explanation. Maybe, Frank said, but here's what I know. I've been a ranger here for 32 years. I've seen things I can't explain. I've lost colleagues who didn't follow the rules, and I've kept myself and others safe by respecting what I don't understand. He tapped the list of rules. You don't have to believe in the supernatural. You just have to follow these rules. Can you do that? I wanted to say no. I wanted to demand scientific explanations, to insist on rational causes. But I remembered the sound of my own voice calling from the darkness, and I nodded. Good, Frank said. Now go home, get some rest. And Sarah, don't talk about this with the other rangers. The ones who need to know already do, the ones who don't. Well, some people are better off skeptical. I drove home in a daze, and I didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing fiddle music in my dreams, and my own voice calling me deeper into the woods. The next few weeks were quiet, and I started to convince myself that the incident had been a one-off, maybe even a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. I settled into my routine, morning patrols, checking in with hikers, maintaining trail markers, filing reports. Normal ranger work. Then I found the boots. It was mid-June, warm and humid, the kind of day where the air feels thick enough to swim through. I was hiking up to one of the backcountry campsites to check on a group of college kids who'd gotten a permit for the week. The trail was steep, and I was sweating through my uniform shirt, cursing the designers who'd chosen dark green polyester as appropriate workwear. I almost walked right past them. They were just off the trail, maybe 10 feet into the woods, arranged in a perfect circle. 8 pairs of hiking boots, all different sizes and styles, sitting upright like people were standing in them. In the center of the circle was a 9th pair, smaller, newer, with pink laces. Rule 2, if you find boots arranged in a circle, call in immediately and leave the area. Do not disturb them. My hand went to my radio, but I didn't press the button yet. I stood there, staring at those boots, trying to find a rational explanation. Some kind of prank. Trail magic gone weird. But something about the scene made my skin crawl. The boots weren't dusty or weathered. They looked like they'd been placed there recently, maybe that morning. And then I saw the pink laces twitch. I grabbed my radio, my hands shaking. Base, this is Chen. I've found... I need Frank. Now. The response was immediate. Chen, what's your location? I gave my coordinates, my eyes locked on those pink laces. They were definitely moving now, pulling tight like someone was tying them from inside boots that had no feet in them. Is it the boots? Frank's voice, urgent. Yes. Get back to the trail right now. Don't touch them, don't photograph them, don't do anything. Just get back to the trail and wait for me there. I backed away slowly, unable to tear my eyes from the circle. All the laces were moving now, pulling and tightening and loosening in a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. The boots didn't move from their positions, but I had the horrible sensation that they were aware of me, watching me somehow, despite having no eyes. I stumbled back onto the trail and waited. Frank arrived 40 minutes later with two other rangers I'd seen around the station but never really talked to. Marcus, a big guy in his 50s who looked like he could wrestle bears, and Eleanor, a quiet woman around Frank's age with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Show us," Frank said. We walked back to the spot, but the boots were gone. Not moved. Gone. The ground where they'd sat was disturbed, showing circular indentations where they'd been, but the boots themselves had vanished. "Shit," Marcus muttered. "How many?" 9 pairs, 8 in a circle, 1 in the center. The center pair had pink laces. Eleanor pulled out a worn notebook and started writing. "Pink laces. Did you recognize any of the boots?" "No. Why would I?" "Because sometimes they're from hikers who went missing," Frank interrupted. "Sometimes we can identify them, notify families, give them some closure, even if we can't give them answers." I felt sick. "You're saying those boots belong to people who disappeared? Where are they?" "We don't know," Eleanor said quietly, "but the boots show up before something bad happens. It's a warning. The number in the circle tells us how many people are at risk." 8, I said. 9, Frank corrected. "The center pair counts. 9 people are going to disappear if we don't figure out who they are and get them off this section of the trail." "That's insane," I said, but my protest sounded weak even to my own ears. "We can't just evacuate the trail based on some mysteriously appearing boots." "We don't evacuate," Marcus said. "We can't. Can you imagine explaining this to the Park Service, to the media? We'd all be fired, probably institutionalized. Instead, we watch. We patrol heavy. We encourage people to hike in groups, to stick to the main trail, to be extra cautious. And we pray it's enough." "And if it's not?" I asked. Nobody answered. Over the next 3 days, we ran ourselves ragged. Extra patrols, constant radio contact, checking on every hiker we could find. I barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline and a growing sense of dread. The college kids I'd been heading to check on were fine. We convinced them to cut their trip short with a story about increased bear activity. They grumbled but packed up. We found 7 other groups on that section of the trail: a solo hiker from Maryland, 2 couples hiking together from Ohio, a father-son duo, a group of 3 women from a hiking club in North Carolina. We talked to all of them, urged them to be careful, gave them our radio frequency just in case. It wasn't enough. On the 3rd night, the call came in. A hiker had found a backpack and sleeping bag at one of the shelters, laid out like someone had just stepped away for a moment. But the sleeping bag was cold, and the hiker's boots, small, with pink laces, were sitting neatly outside the tent. The solo hiker from Maryland. A 23-year-old woman named Jennifer Page, doing a section hike to celebrate her college graduation. We searched for 3 days, brought in search and rescue, dog teams, volunteers. We combed every inch of that section of trail. We found nothing, no trace of Jennifer beyond her abandoned camp. The official report said she likely became disoriented and wandered off trail. Maybe fell, maybe got injured and succumbed to exposure. It happened, tragically, more often than people realized. The case would stay open, but without leads, there wasn't much more to do. But I knew better. I'd seen those pink laces tying themselves. 1, Frank said when the search was finally called off. 1 person taken. Maybe the warning was enough. Maybe we saved the other 8. Or maybe it just started with her, Eleanor added darkly. She was right. Over the next month, 3 more hikers vanished from that section of the trail. Different dates, different times, but always the same pattern. Camp left undisturbed, no signs of struggle, boots placed neatly outside their tent or shelter. The Park Service started talking about closing the section. Local news picked up the story. Theories ranged from a serial killer to wild animal attacks to people simply getting lost in the notoriously difficult terrain. I kept seeing boots, not in circles anymore, but single pairs, placed carefully on the trail like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. I'd radio them in, and by the time backup arrived, they'd be gone. Marcus started calling them markers. Eleanor called them invitations. Frank didn't call them anything. He just looked older and more tired each time it happened. And then I met David Lee. He showed up at the ranger station on a sweltering day in mid-July, a backpack over one shoulder and a camera around his neck. He was maybe 30, Korean-American, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of eager enthusiasm I'd had when I first started this job. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Hi," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Lee, freelance journalist. I'm working on a piece about the disappearances on the Appalachian Trail. I was hoping I could talk to someone about the recent incidents." Frank was out, so I was alone at the station. I should have told David we couldn't comment on ongoing investigations. I should have sent him to the Park Service PR office. But I was tired, frustrated, and sick of pretending everything was normal. "Off the record?" I asked. His eyes lit up. "Absolutely." I made coffee, and we sat on the porch of the ranger station. I didn't tell him about the rules or the supernatural elements. I'm not that far gone. But I told him about the patterns I'd noticed. The way the disappearances seemed to cluster around certain dates, the strange atmosphere in the woods before someone went missing, the reports from other hikers of unusual sounds and sights. David listened, taking notes, asking smart questions. He'd done his research. He knew about Michael Torres, about other disappearances over the years, about the folklore surrounding certain sections of the Appalachian Trail. "Do you believe in curses?" he asked suddenly. I laughed, but it came out bitter. "I believe in facts. I believe in evidence. But you've seen things you can't explain." I met his eyes. "Haven't you? You're investigating this story for a reason." He smiled a little sadly. "My sister. She disappeared hiking in the Cascades 5 years ago. They never found her. And the last entry in her journal talked about hearing music in the woods." My blood ran cold. "What kind of music?" "Fiddle music. Beautiful," she said. The most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. I stood up abruptly. "David, you need to leave." "What?" "This section of the trail, this investigation. You need to drop it and get as far away from here as possible." He stood too, confused and a little offended. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is going to get you killed," I said flatly. "There are things in these mountains that don't want to be investigated. Your sister—" I stopped, choosing my words carefully. "Your sister followed the music. If you keep digging into this, you might follow it too." David stared at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You do believe, don't you, in whatever's out here?" I didn't answer. After a moment, he nodded, packed up his notes, and left. I watched his car disappear down the access road and felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that he was leaving. Dread that he wouldn't stay gone. I was right to feel dread. David checked into a motel in the nearest town and spent the next week interviewing locals, hikers, anyone who would talk to him about the trail. I know because some of them mentioned it on their hikes, that journalist fellow asking about the disappearances. And I know because on the 8th day, David showed up on the trail wearing a white t-shirt, white shorts, and a determined expression. I spotted him during an evening patrol just as the sun was setting. He was standing near the junction of 2 trails, setting up some kind of recording equipment. "David," I called out, jogging over to him, "what are you doing?" He looked up, and there was something different about his expression, something intense and slightly manic. "I'm going to prove it," he said. "Whatever's out here, whatever took my sister and all these other people, I'm going to get evidence of it." "By doing what exactly?" "By giving it what it wants, by breaking the rules." He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "I found a list, Sarah. A ranger named Michael Torres kept detailed journals. His wife gave them to me. He documented everything, all the strange occurrences, all the rules, all the patterns. And he figured out that the entities out here respond to violations. They show themselves when the rules are broken." "Michael Torres disappeared," I said urgently. "He's been missing for 13 years. He went to find proof. He followed the music. He acknowledged the white hikers. He did everything the rules said not to do, and something responded." David's eyes were bright with conviction. "I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to be smart about it. I've got cameras, recording equipment, emergency beacons. I'll document everything, and if something happens to me, the evidence will get out." I grabbed his arm. David, listen to me. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish, it's not worth your life. Your sister wouldn't want this. My sister deserves answers, he shouted, pulling away. Her family deserves closure. All these families deserve to know what happened to their loved ones, and I'm going to give them that. You're going to give them another person to mourn, I said. Please, David, come back to the station. We can talk about this. But he was already turning away, adjusting his camera. I'm staying out here tonight. I'm going to wait for the music, and I'm going to follow it. I'm going to find the white hikers and talk to them. I'm going to break every rule on that list and force these things to show themselves. David, you can try to stop me, but I'll just come back tomorrow. Or the next day. I'm doing this, Sarah. With or without your help. I should have called Frank. I should have radioed for backup. Found some way to force David off the trail. But I was paralyzed by indecision, and by the time I made up my mind to act, David had walked away into the woods. I followed him at a distance, radioing Frank and explaining the situation. He told me to keep David in sight, but not to engage, that he was coming with Marcus and Eleanor. But the sun was setting fast, and the woods were getting dark, and David was moving with purpose towards something I couldn't see. At 9:47 p.m., the music started. I'd been expecting it, but it still made my skin crawl. That same fiddle music, bright and cheerful and deeply wrong. David heard it too. I saw him stop, turn toward the sound and smile. He raised his camera and started filming. David, don't! I called, but he ignored me. He walked toward the music and I followed, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. The woods seemed to warp around us, trees growing closer together, shadows deepening impossibly. David's camera light cut through the darkness, and in its beam I saw things moving between the trees, pale figures that might have been people, but moved in ways that people shouldn't. The music grew louder. David was almost running now, chasing the sound with single-minded determination. And then, abruptly, he stopped. I caught up to him, gasping for breath, and saw what had made him freeze. There were 7 people standing in a small clearing. All of them wore white shirts, white pants, white shoes. They stood perfectly still, facing outward in a circle, and even from 20 feet away I could tell something was fundamentally wrong with them. Their proportions were slightly off, their stillness too complete. They didn't breathe. They didn't blink. Rule 7. Never acknowledge the hikers who wear all white after sunset. David, I whispered, we need to go, right now. But David raised his camera and called out, hello, can I talk to you folks for a minute? The figures didn't respond, didn't move, but the music stopped. In the sudden silence I heard something else, a wet, sliding sound, like meat being pulled apart. The figures began to turn, moving in perfect synchronization, rotating to face us. And as they turned, I saw their faces. They had no faces. Where eyes and noses and mouths should have been, there was just smooth skin, unbroken and pale as moonlight. But despite the absence of eyes, I knew they were looking at us. Despite the absence of mouths, I knew they were smiling. David lowered his camera slowly. "Oh God," he whispered. One of the figures raised its arm, pointing directly at David. The others did the same, all 7 of them pointing in perfect unison, and then they started walking toward us. I grabbed David's arm and ran, dragging him with me. Behind us, I could hear footsteps. Too many footsteps, moving in that same wrong rhythm I'd heard before. David was sobbing, still clutching his camera, stumbling over roots and rocks. We burst onto the trail, and I screamed into my radio, "Frank, we're coming in hot. We've got contact. We need extraction now." The radio crackled back. "Where are you?" I looked around wildly, trying to find a landmark, and that's when I saw them, the white figures standing on the trail ahead of us. Not the same ones. These were different, taller, and there were more of them. 12, maybe 15, forming a line across the trail. David and I skidded to a stop. I turned to run the other way, but there were more white figures behind us. We were surrounded. "Sarah," David whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The figures began to close in. Up close, I could see that their skin wasn't just pale. It was translucent, showing shadows of what might have been veins or bones or something else entirely underneath. Their movements were jerky, like stop-motion animation, advancing in small jumps rather than smooth steps. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it at the nearest figure. It stopped, tilting its head in a gesture that was almost curious. The beam of my flashlight seemed to pass through it rather than reflecting off it, and where the light touched, the figure became even more transparent, almost ethereal. "Light," I gasped. "David, your camera light." He fumbled with his camera, turning on the bright LED light mounted on top. The figures recoiled, their movements becoming more agitated. Some of them began to flicker, their forms becoming unstable. And then I heard Frank's voice, not from the radio, but from the trail. "Get down." David and I hit the ground as powerful flashlight beams cut through the darkness from multiple directions. Frank, Marcus, and Elena had arrived with high-powered searchlights, the kind used for night rescues. The white figures writhed in the light, their forms breaking apart into wisps of something that looked like fog but moved with purpose and malice. "Move!" Marcus shouted, "while they're disoriented." We ran, staying within the beams of the searchlights, the rangers forming a protective triangle around us. The white figures didn't follow. They dispersed into the shadows, vanishing like smoke. But I could still feel them watching, waiting. We made it back to the ranger station, and Frank immediately locked the doors and closed all the curtains. David collapsed into a chair, his camera still clutched in his hands, his face pale and sweating. "What the fuck were those things?" he gasped. "We don't know," Eleanor said. "We call them the White Walkers, though that's probably not what they are. They've been reported in these mountains for over 100 years, maybe longer. Native American folklore talks about similar entities, spirits that wear the shape of people but aren't people, that hunt those who break certain taboos." "Did you get it?" Marcus asked David. "On camera?" David looked down at his camera with shaking hands. He rewound the footage and pressed play. We all gathered around to watch. The screen showed nothing but static and darkness. No music, no white figures, no clearing. Just David's panicked breathing and the sound of us running. "No," David whispered. "No, that's not right. I saw them. We all saw them." "They don't show up on recordings," Frank said quietly. "We've tried before. Whatever they are, they exist in a way that technology can't capture. Only human eyes can see them." David stared at his camera in disbelief, then suddenly stood and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. "3 years," he said, his voice breaking. 3 years investigating this, and I've got nothing. No proof, no evidence, just a story that makes me sound insane." "You've got your life," I said. "That's more than some people got." He turned to me, anger and desperation in his eyes. "My sister is dead, and I can't even prove how or why. These things, whatever they are, they're taking people, and no one believes it. No one's doing anything to stop them." "What would you have us do?" Frank asked, not unkindly. "Close the trail? Based on what evidence? Our testimony? We'd be laughed out of our jobs. At best, we'd be forced into early retirement. At worst, institutionalized. So we just let it keep happening." "We follow the rules," Elena said firmly. "We warn people without telling them why. We patrol, we watch, we try to keep people safe. It's not perfect, but it's all we can do." David slumped back into his chair, defeated. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of our helplessness pressing down on all of us. Finally, Frank spoke. "You need to leave, David. Go back to your life. Write a story if you want, but make it about hiking safety, about the dangers of going into the wilderness unprepared. Warn people without telling them about the things they won't believe. It's the best you can do." David left the next morning. I walked him to his car, both of us exhausted and shaken. Before he drove away, he turned to me and said, "Do you think my sister suffered? At the end?" I wanted to lie, to give him comfort, but I respected him too much for that. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I hope it was quick. I hope she didn't have time to be afraid." He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and got in his car. I never saw him again, but his story did come out 6 months later. He published it in a mid-tier magazine under the headline, "The Appalachian Trail's Deadliest Section, A History of Disappearances." It was good journalism, well-researched, compelling, focused on the human stories of the missing hikers. He mentioned local folklore about spirits in the mountains, but framed it as cultural context rather than fact. The article got some attention, led to a few interviews, maybe made some hikers more cautious. Whether it saved any lives, I'll never know. The summer of 1995 was brutal. We lost 2 more hikers in July, 3 in August. September brought a respite. No disappearances, no boot circles, no white figures reported. October was the same. By November, when the hiking season slowed to a trickle, I started to think maybe it was over. I should have known better. The incident that finally broke me happened on November 17, 1995. It was unusually warm for late autumn, one of those false spring days that sometimes happen in the mountains. I was doing what I thought would be my last major patrol before winter, checking the shelters and campsites for any damage that needed repair before the snow came. I found the birds at the Devil's Creek shelter. There were hundreds of them. Dead birds, crows, ravens, jays, even a few hawks, arranged in intricate patterns across the shelter floor. They formed spirals and symbols I didn't recognize, their bodies perfectly preserved despite clearly being dead for some time. No smell of decay, no signs of scavengers, just hundreds of small black bodies arranged with impossible precision. Rule 5: dead birds arranged in patterns are warnings. Heed them. I radioed it in immediately. Frank told me to photograph the patterns, then get out and seal the shelter. We'd deal with it in the morning. But as I was taking photographs, I noticed something. The patterns weren't random. They formed letters, or something like letters. I knelt down trying to make sense of it, and slowly the message became clear. 8 more before the snow. I ran back to the ranger station, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. Frank was waiting outside with Marcus and Eleanor, already geared up. "You saw it," Frank said. 8 more. It said 8 more before the snow. "Shit," Marcus muttered. "There are still hikers out there, end-of-season folks trying to beat the weather." We spent the next 3 days in a desperate scramble. We hiked every section of the trail, warning every hiker we found, strongly urging them to end their trips early. Most complied. Something about our intensity must have convinced them we were serious. We got 12 people off the trail. But we couldn't find everyone. On November 20th, the first snow started falling. Light at first, just flurries, but the forecast called for a major storm. Any hikers still on the trail would need to shelter in place or risk hypothermia. That night, I was manning the station alone. Frank and the others were out doing a final sweep, when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find a woman standing on the porch. She was maybe 60, wearing a purple fleece jacket and hiking boots, her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked like 1,000 other hikers I'd helped over the season. "Thank goodness," she said, smiling. "I was worried I wouldn't find anyone. My hiking group got separated, and I think I'm lost. Can you help me?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, get warm. When did you last see your group?" She walked into the station, looking around with interest. "Oh, this afternoon. We were near the ridge line. Such beautiful views, even with the snow coming." Something nagged at me, but I couldn't place what. I went to the map on the wall, preparing to mark her location. "Which ridge? We've got several in this section." "The one with the lovely rocks, all arranged in such interesting patterns." My hand froze on the map. I turned slowly to look at her. She was still smiling, but her eyes were wrong. Too bright, too knowing. "Who are you?" I asked. "I told you, I'm a hiker who got separated from my group." She tilted her head. "Don't you want to help me find them? Where's your pack, your gear?" She looked down at herself, as if noticing for the first time that she carried nothing. "Oh, I must have dropped it when I got lost." I moved toward the radio, and she moved with me, impossibly fast. She was suddenly between me and the desk, still smiling. "You're very dedicated," she said. "Staying out here, trying to protect people from things they don't understand. Trying to follow rules you don't fully believe in. It's admirable." "What are you? What do you think I am?" I swallowed hard. "Something that shouldn't exist." She laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes mixed with screaming. "Oh, but we do exist. We've always existed. These mountains are old, Sarah Chen. So much older than your kind. We were here before humans walked upright, and we'll be here long after you're gone. Why are you talking to me? Why not just—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Because you're different," she said. "You follow the rules, but you don't do it out of fear. You do it because you genuinely want to protect people. That's rare. And it's interesting. She walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. In the reflection, I could see that she cast no shadow. 8 more before the snow, she said. That's what the warning said. But it wasn't a threat, Sarah. It was an offer. An offer. She turned back to me, and for just a moment her friendly hiker disguise slipped. I saw something vast and cold and ancient, something that wore human shape the way I might wear a costume. Then the mask was back in place. 8 lives, she said. That's the toll for this year. We've already taken 4. We need 4 more, and then we'll rest until spring. That's how it works. A balance, old as these mountains. That's insane. You're murdering people for some arbitrary... Not arbitrary, she interrupted. Necessary. These mountains are thin places, Sarah, boundaries between worlds. We're the guardians of those boundaries. The maintenance crew, if you will. Human energy, human life force. It patches the weak spots, keeps things that are much worse than us from coming through. I don't believe you. You don't have to believe me. You just have to choose. She smiled again, and this time there was something almost sympathetic in it. 8 more before the snow, but I'm giving you a choice. You can let nature take its course. 4 more random hikers, people who break the rules or are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or what? Or you can volunteer. You and 3 others. A willing sacrifice is worth more than a random taking. It strengthens the boundary better, lasts longer. If you give yourselves, we won't need to take anyone else for 5 years. Maybe longer. I stared at her in horror. You want me to kill myself? To convince 3 other people to kill themselves? Not kill, transform, join us, become guardians of the boundary. You'd keep your consciousness, your memories, you'd just exist in a different way. And you'd be protecting people. Isn't that what you've always wanted? No, I said firmly, absolutely not. She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. Then 4 more will disappear, their families will mourn, their friends will wonder what happened, and it will be because you chose not to act. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your choice. She walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. If you tell anyone about this conversation, about the choice I offered, the deal is off. We take 8 more instead of 4, and we'll start with the people you care about. She opened the door and stepped out into the snow. I ran after her, but the porch was empty. The only footprints in the fresh snow were my own. I stood there for a long time, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. A test? A mind game? A genuine offer from something inhuman? I didn't know, couldn't know. When Frank and the others returned, I told them about finding the station empty when they got back, about hearing noises outside. I didn't mention the woman, didn't mention the choice. I spent that entire night sitting up, wrestling with impossible ethics. If what she said was true, if refusing meant 4 more people would die, was I responsible for those deaths? But if I believed her, if I acted on her offer, wasn't I just enabling this horror? And how could I possibly ask anyone else to make that sacrifice with me? By morning, I'd made my decision. I didn't believe her. Couldn't believe her. It was a manipulation, a mind game from something that fed on fear and guilt. I would not give in to it. 4 days later, on November 24th, we found the first body. A hiker named Tom Brennan, 62 years old, retired teacher from Pennsylvania. He'd been doing a solo end-of-season hike. We found him at his campsite, sitting upright in his sleeping bag, no signs of struggle or distress. He'd simply stopped living. The medical examiner ruled it a heart attack. Natural causes, but I knew better. I saw the expression on his face, peaceful, almost blissful, like he'd seen something wonderful before he died. And when I checked his journal, the last entry said, "The most beautiful music I've ever heard. I have to find where it's coming from." 3 more bodies were found over the next week. Different locations, different circumstances, but the same result. Natural causes, heart attacks, hypothermia, falls. Things that happened in the mountains. Things that happened when the rules were broken. I drove to each family member I could reach. I couldn't tell them the truth. They wouldn't believe me, but I could see their pain, their confusion, their desperate need for answers I couldn't give them. And each time I wondered, Could I have prevented this? Should I have taken the deal? On December 1st, the snow came in earnest, and hiking season officially ended. The disappearances stopped. The white figures weren't seen again. The mountains grew quiet under their blanket of white. I requested a transfer in January of 1996. Frank didn't try to talk me out of it. He just nodded, understanding in his eyes, and signed the paperwork. Before I left, he gave me one last piece of advice. Whatever you saw, whatever you learned out there, don't try to fight it. Don't try to expose it. People have tried. They disappear, or they go crazy, or they have accidents. The best thing you can do is walk away, live your life, and maybe warn the people who come after you in whatever way you can. Is that what you did? I asked. I'm still here, aren't I? Still doing this job, still following the rules, still losing sleep over the people I couldn't save. He smiled sadly. Some battles you can't win, Sarah. You just survive them and try to minimize the damage. I took a position as a ranger in a national park in the southwest. Desert, not mountains, wide open spaces where you could see for miles. I told myself I was moving on, starting fresh. But I never stopped thinking about that season on the Appalachian Trail, about the rules, about the people who disappeared, about the choice I was offered and didn't take. And I never stopped wondering if I made the right decision. The nightmares started about 3 months after I left Virginia. Always the same dream. I'm walking through the woods at night, following that beautiful fiddle music. The white figures stand in a circle around me, their faceless heads all turned in my direction. And the woman from the ranger station is there too, still wearing her purple fleece jacket, still smiling. You chose wrong, she says in the dream, and they paid the price. Behind her I see them, Tom Brennan and the 3 others who died. But there are more people too, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, stretching back into the darkness. All the people who've disappeared from those mountains over the years. All the ones the rules couldn't save. I'd wake up sweating, gasping for air, my heart pounding. And I'd think about calling Frank, asking him if he had the same dreams, if the guilt ever faded. But I never did. What was the point? We'd both made our choices. We were both living with the consequences. 3 years into my new position, I got a call from Elena. I'd stayed in touch with her sporadically, holiday cards, occasional emails. But we'd never talked about what happened that season. There was an unspoken agreement among those of us who'd been there. We didn't discuss it, didn't dwell on it. We just tried to move forward. But Eleanor's voice on the phone was urgent. Sarah, I need to tell you something. It's about Frank. My stomach dropped. What happened? He's missing. Went out on a routine patrol 3 days ago and didn't come back. We found his truck at one of the trailheads, his radio smashed, his boots. She paused and I could hear her breathing hard. His boots were in a circle, Sarah, with 11 others. I felt like I'd been punched. Frank, who'd been so careful, who'd followed the rules religiously for 32 years. How? We don't know. He'd been acting strange the past few weeks, distracted. Marcus said he'd been making odd comments about debts and balances. And then last Tuesday, he told Marcus he had something he needed to do, something he should have done years ago. The woman's voice echoed in my memory. A willing sacrifice is worth more than a random taking. Oh God, I whispered. Elena, I need to tell you something. Something that happened right before I left. I told her everything. The woman in the ranger station, the offer, the choice I'd been given. Elena listened in silence, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Do you think Frank took the deal? She finally asked. I don't know. Maybe not my deal specifically, but maybe he was made the same offer. Maybe he'd been carrying it around all these years, wondering if he should have said yes. Maybe he finally decided that he'd rather trade himself than watch more hikers die, Eleanor finished. That sounds like Frank. It's not worth it, I said fiercely. Whatever those things promised, it's not worth it. Frank was... I caught myself, not wanting to use past tense. Frank is a good man. The world needs more Frank Whitmores, not fewer. I know, Eleanor said softly, but you know what Frank would say. Some battles you can't win, you just survive them and try to minimize the damage. We hung up shortly after, both of us subdued and shaken. I requested time off from my job and drove back to Virginia. I told myself it was to help with the search, to support Eleanor and Marcus and the other rangers who'd known Frank. But really, I needed to see it for myself. Needed to know what had happened to the man who'd taught me to survive in those mountains. The search lasted 2 weeks. We brought in every resource available: helicopters, dog teams, thermal imaging, volunteers from all over the state. We combed every inch of Frank's usual patrol area. We checked the shelters, the campsites, the off-trail areas where hikers sometimes wandered. We found nothing. Well, not nothing. We found strange things. Bird carcasses arranged in patterns that spelled out words we couldn't quite read. Trees that had been stripped of their bark in spiral patterns, the exposed wood underneath carved with symbols that hurt to look at. And boots, so many boots, scattered in places they shouldn't be, always in circles, always in odd numbers. On the 13th day of the search, I decided to go to the ranger station where I'd had my encounter with the woman. It was officially closed for the season, boarded up for winter, but I had keys from my old position that still worked. The station was exactly as I remembered it. Same battered furniture, same stained coffee maker, same maps on the walls. But there was something new. A letter on the desk, in an envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper inside was the same yellowed type as the rules list, and the handwriting was Frank's. I recognized his careful, blocky print. "Sarah," it read, "if you're reading this, then I've made my choice. I hope you can understand. I hope you won't think less of me for it. I've been a ranger in these mountains for 32 years. In that time, I've seen 47 people disappear, 47 families destroyed, 47 sets of questions I couldn't answer honestly, and every single one of them has haunted me. After Michael Torres vanished, I was offered the same choice you were: 4 lives, mine and 3 others who'd be willing, in exchange for years of peace. I said no. I was young, stubborn, convinced I could protect people without surrendering to whatever dark force governs these mountains. I was wrong. In the 13 years since I refused, another 38 people have disappeared. If I'd taken the deal, most of them would still be alive. Their children would still have parents. Their parents would still have children. And all because I was too proud, too rational, too unwilling to accept that some things operate beyond human understanding. I'm not making that mistake again. I've found 3 others, other rangers who've worked these mountains, who've seen what I've seen, who understand the cost of inaction. We've made our peace with it. We're going in willingly, eyes open, knowing what we're doing. We're not dying, Sarah. Or maybe we are, but it's not death as you understand it. It's transformation. It's becoming part of the boundary, part of the defense that keeps worse things from coming through. The woman explained it to me, showed me what it would mean. I'll keep my consciousness, my sense of self. I'll just exist differently. And I'll be protecting people, really protecting them, in a way I never could as a human ranger. I know you'll think this is insane. Maybe it is. But it's the only way I can live with myself, or whatever I'm becoming. It's the only way I can make up for all the people I failed to save. Don't try to find me. Don't try to reverse this. It's done. And it's my choice. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Follow the rules. And if you're ever offered this choice again, really think about it before you refuse. The weight of all those deaths, it's heavier than you know. Frank, I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I couldn't show this to Elena or Marcus. They'd want to do something, to investigate, to try to bring Frank back somehow. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that would only make things worse. Frank had made his choice. 4 rangers, trading themselves for years of peace. 4 willing sacrifices to strengthen the boundary and save lives, and I didn't know if I should be proud of him or horrified. I left Virginia the next day. The official search was called off shortly after. Frank Whitmore was declared missing, presumed dead due to a fall or other wilderness accident. His wife got his pension. His kids got closure, sort of. The world moved on, but I couldn't move on. Not really. I started researching, digging into the history of the Appalachian Trail and other wilderness areas. I spent my nights in libraries and my days off driving to small towns near national forests, talking to old-timers and park rangers and anyone else who might have stories to tell. What I found terrified me. The rules exist everywhere. Not just the Appalachian Trail, every major wilderness area has them. Different specifics, different entities, but the same basic pattern. Places where reality is thin, where human and inhuman worlds overlap, where certain behaviors attract attention from things we don't understand. And the sacrifices. God, the sacrifices. Every few years, in wilderness areas around the country, rangers disappear. Experienced professionals who know the terrain, who wouldn't make rookie mistakes, who simply vanish without a trace. The official explanations vary. Falls, animal attacks, voluntary disappearances. But the pattern is unmistakable once you start looking for it. They're taking the deal. Rangers who can't bear the weight of watching people die, who are offered a terrible choice and decide that becoming something inhuman is better than remaining human and helpless. I found a forum, not on the regular internet, but on an old BBS system that required specific knowledge to access. It was full of current and former rangers, all of us sharing stories, comparing rules, trying to make sense of what we'd experienced. One thread caught my attention. It was titled "The Mathematics of Sacrifice," and it was started by a ranger from the Pacific Northwest named Robert Chen. No relation to me, though the coincidence was eerie. "I've been tracking the disappearances for 15 years, Robert wrote, both the random ones and the ranger ones, and I think I've figured out the pattern. Every ranger who takes the deal eliminates approximately 20 to 30 random disappearances over the next 5 to 7 years. The math is clear. Willing sacrifices save lives. A lot of lives. But here's the thing. The entities are lying about the necessity. I've compared wilderness areas with active ranger sacrifices to ones without them. The protected areas have fewer disappearances, yes. But the unprotected areas don't suddenly spike with thousands of deaths. They maintain a baseline, maybe 3 to 5 disappearances per year in high-traffic areas. What the entities are really doing is harvesting energy, human life force, human consciousness, whatever you want to call it. They prefer willing sacrifices because those carry more energy, more power. But they don't need them. They're perfectly capable of surviving on the baseline disappearances. They're playing us, making us think we have to choose between becoming like them or watching innocent people die. But it's a false choice. We could refuse, enforce the rules more strictly, educate hikers better, and we'd still see some disappearances because that's the nature of wilderness, human error, and yes, these entities taking their baseline toll, but it wouldn't be the catastrophe they threaten us with. Don't take the deal. Don't let them turn you into what they are. There are other ways. I stared at Robert's post for hours. If he was right, then Frank had sacrificed himself for nothing. Then all those rangers over the years had made a terrible mistake. But if he was wrong, if the entities were telling the truth about the necessity of the sacrifices, then refusing the deal meant condemning innocent hikers to death. How do you know? How do you possibly know which is true when you're dealing with beings that exist outside human understanding, that can manipulate perception and reality, that have no obligation to be honest with us? I reached out to Robert through the forum's private message system. We corresponded for months, sharing data, comparing notes, trying to build a comprehensive understanding of what was happening in America's wilderness areas. And slowly, carefully, we started to form a plan. If the entities were lying, if the sacrifices weren't necessary, then we needed to prove it. We needed to document a wilderness area where rangers refused the deal, where the rules were strictly enforced, where hikers were properly educated, and show that the catastrophic surge in disappearances didn't happen. We picked an area in the Cascade Mountains, a section known for its thin places and strange occurrences. Robert worked there, and he had the support of several other rangers who'd been recruited into our informal network. They agreed to refuse any deals offered, to enforce the rules rigorously, and to keep meticulous records of everything that happened. The experiment started in the spring of 1999 and ran through the fall of 2001. During that time, Robert and his team patrolled more frequently than standard protocols required, installed better trail markers and signage, created an education program for hikers that emphasized safety rules without explaining the supernatural elements, documented every strange occurrence, every rule violation, every unusual sighting, supported each other when the entities made offers, when the pressure to take the deal became overwhelming, and the results: 12 disappearances over 2.5 years, 12 people who broke the rules despite warnings, who wandered off trail, who ignored the signs and paid the price, 12 deaths in 30 months. For comparison, in the previous decade, when rangers in that area had been taking deals regularly, the average was 4 disappearances per year. 40 deaths in 10 years. Robert's refusal to sacrifice himself and his team had resulted in fewer deaths, not more. The entities had been lying. Or had they? Because here's the thing. We couldn't know what would have happened in a reality where Robert had taken the deal. Maybe those 12 people would have lived. Maybe the boundary would have been stronger, the rules more effective, the entities less hungry. Or maybe they would have died anyway, and Robert would have given up his humanity for nothing. This is the hell of dealing with unknowable beings. You can never be certain. You can gather data, make educated guesses, form hypotheses, but you can never know for sure. Still, Robert's experiment gave me hope. It suggested that we had more power than the entities wanted us to believe. That refusal was not only possible, but potentially the right choice. I shared Robert's findings with Eleanor and Marcus. They'd both stayed on as rangers in Virginia, both still dealing with the occasional disappearance, both carrying the weight of Frank's loss. They read the data in silence, their expressions unreadable. "So Frank died for nothing," Marcus finally said. "Or he saved lives," Elena countered. "We don't know. We can't know." "We can know that we have a choice," I said. "That's what Robert proved. The entities want us to feel helpless, to think that sacrifice is the only option. But we can refuse. We can fight back in other ways." "At what cost?" Marcus asked. "Those 12 people in Robert's area, they didn't have to die. If he'd taken the deal, we'd never know if it was necessary," I interrupted. "We'd just keep sacrificing rangers, keep feeding these things, keep accepting the narrative that we're powerless. Robert proved we're not." The three of us talked long into the night, debating ethics and pragmatism, idealism and realism. We didn't reach a consensus. How could we? We were dealing with impossible choices in an impossible situation. But we agreed on one thing. Rangers needed to know they had options. The next generation needed to understand that taking the deal wasn't the only way to protect hikers. So we started our own informal training program. Whenever new rangers came to work in areas known for thin places, we'd pull them aside after they'd had their first encounter. After they'd seen something that shook their rational worldview. We'd give them the rules, yes, but we'd also give them Robert's data. We'd tell them about Frank's choice and what it cost him. We'd make sure they knew that refusing was possible. Some of them listened. Some of them thought we were crazy. And some of them, when they were eventually offered the deal, took it anyway. Because that's the thing about these situations. Knowing you have a choice doesn't make the choice any easier. In 2003, I was contacted by a woman named Dr. Jennifer Salas, an anthropologist who specialized in folklore and liminal spaces. She'd been collecting stories about thin places for years and had heard about our network through academic channels. "I think I can help you," she said when we met at a coffee shop in Flagstaff. "I've been studying these phenomena from a cultural and historical perspective, and I think I know what you're dealing with." She pulled out a thick folder of papers, historical documents, anthropological reports, folklore collections from around the world. What you call entities or white figures indigenous peoples have known about for thousands of years, she explained. They're called different things in different cultures. The Nanahi in Cherokee tradition, the Yunwi-Tsunsdi, the little people. European folklore has similar beings: Fae, Cedar, the good folk. Asian traditions speak of spirits that guard boundaries between worlds. The common thread is this: they're not evil exactly. They're more like immune systems. They exist at the boundaries between human and non-human reality, and they maintain those boundaries through a kind of feedback mechanism. When too many humans cross into liminal spaces, when we disturb the balance too much, they push back, remove some of us from the equation. So the disappearances are, I trailed off. necessary from their perspective. Not because they enjoy killing, I don't think they experience enjoyment as we understand it, but because they're maintaining equilibrium. Humans expand into wilderness areas, build trails, invite thousands of people into these thin places. The boundaries get stressed, the entities respond by removing humans until the balance is restored. And the sacrifices? Marcus asked. He'd come with me to meet Jennifer. A shortcut, she said. A willing sacrifice carries enormous power. The power of choice, of agency. One ranger who chooses to cross over permanently can stabilize a boundary much more effectively than 10 random hikers who are taken against their will. So the entities offer the deal because it's efficient, not because it's necessary. So Robert was right, I said. They can survive without the willing sacrifices. They just prefer not to. Exactly. And here's the thing. The boundaries are actually getting stronger on their own. Human activity in wilderness areas peaked in the 1990s and has been declining since then. Fewer people hiking, camping, living near wild spaces. The pressure on the boundaries is decreasing naturally. In another generation or two, the entities might not need to take anyone, willing or otherwise. This was huge. This meant that every ranger who'd taken the deal in the past decade had sacrificed themselves unnecessarily. Frank had died for nothing, or had he? Because the boundaries were strengthening, partly because rangers like Frank had taken the deal, had reduced the number of random disappearances, had made the wilderness seem safer, and thus prevented some of the overcrowding that stressed the boundaries in the first place. Cause and effect in a system this complex were impossible to untangle. Jennifer continued, "But I need to warn you about something. The entities aren't stupid. They know their leverage is decreasing as wilderness use declines, which means they're going to push harder in the near term, make more aggressive offers, create more pressure on rangers to take deals. They're trying to harvest as much energy as possible before the opportunity passes." "How much harder?" Marcus asked. "I've been tracking reports. In the past 5 years, there's been a 40% increase in rangers taking deals. But there's also been a 60% increase in rangers refusing and then dying in accidents shortly after. The entities are retaliating against refusal more aggressively than they used to." My blood ran cold. "You're saying if we refuse, they'll kill us anyway?" "Not always, but sometimes. They're getting desperate." She pulled out another document, a list of names, dates, and circumstances. "These are all rangers who refused deals and then died within 6 months. The official causes range from falls to animal attacks to sudden medical emergencies. But the pattern is clear." I scanned the list, my stomach sinking. 37 names. 37 rangers who'd said no and paid the ultimate price anyway. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Give in to the pressure? Let them take what they want?" "No," Jennifer said firmly. "You keep refusing. You keep fighting. Because the alternative is worse." "Worse than dying?" "Worse than dying human, yes. Because, Sarah, I need you to understand something about what happens to the rangers who take the deal. They don't just transform into boundary guardians. They become part of the entity's system. They lose their individual will, their humanity, their connection to the people they claimed they wanted to protect. Frank isn't out there somewhere, conscious and watching over hikers. Frank is gone. What remains is something that wears his memories like a costume, but isn't him anymore." "How do you know that?" Marcus demanded. "Because I've talked to one." She let that sit for a moment, watching our faces. 5 years ago, I was doing fieldwork in the Smokies. I encountered one of the white figures, and unlike most people, I didn't run. I used specific protocols from Cherokee tradition, offerings, respectful language, acknowledgement of their role, and it talked to me. Not in English, but in concepts that my mind translated into language. It showed me what it was. And Marcus, it had been human once. A ranger from the 1960s who'd taken the deal, but there was nothing left of the person they'd been. Just fragments, memories used as decoration, personality traits deployed strategically, but no core identity. No self. That's what Frank is now. That's what all of them become. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need some air." He walked out, and I didn't follow him. I sat with Jennifer in the coffee shop, processing what she'd told me, trying to reconcile it with everything I'd believed. "There's hope, though," Jennifer said quietly. "The entity's power is waning. Every year it gets weaker. Every year the boundaries stabilize a little more on their own. We're winning, Sarah. Slowly, gradually, but we're winning. We just have to hold on long enough." How long is long enough? Another generation, maybe two. Our grandchildren might be able to hike those trails without fear. But we have to survive that long, and we have to refuse to feed the system, even when it threatens us, even when it costs us. When Marcus came back, his eyes were red, but his jaw was set. "What do you need from us?" he asked Jennifer. "Documentation. Keep recording everything, every offer, every threat, every strange occurrence. I'm building a comprehensive database, and when the time is right, we'll go public. Not with wild claims about supernatural entities, but with a pattern of mysterious disappearances and ranger deaths that demands investigation. We'll force the Park Service to take it seriously, to implement better safety protocols, to restrict access to the most dangerous areas. They'll shut us down," I said. "Call us crazy, fire us, discredit everything we've worked for." "Probably," Jennifer agreed. "But some of it will stick. Some hikers will stay away from thin places, some rangers will refuse to work certain sections, and every little bit helps shift the balance." We agreed to help her. What else could we do? Over the next 15 years, our network grew. Rangers from across the country, all of us working in thin places, all of us refusing deals, all of us documenting everything. Some of us died, accidents, illnesses, mysterious circumstances, but more of us survived. And Jennifer was right. The entity's power waned. Disappearances decreased. The offers became less frequent. The white figures were seen less often. By 2018, rangers working my old section of the Appalachian Trail reported going entire seasons without a single strange occurrence. The rules were still there, still necessary, but violations didn't always result in disappearances anymore. Sometimes hikers who followed the music just got lost and found their way back. Sometimes the white figures appeared but didn't approach, just watched from a distance before fading away. The boundaries were healing. The boundaries were healing, but they weren't healed yet. Which brings me to why I'm writing this now, in 2024, nearly 30 years after that terrible season in 1995. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a young ranger named Alex Martinez. They'd found my name in Jennifer Salas's database. Jennifer herself passed away in 2022, cancer, though I sometimes wonder if it was really just cancer, and they needed advice. "I've been offered the deal," Alex said, their voice shaking, "and I don't know what to do." I drove to meet them in person. After everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned, I owed them that much. We met at a diner near their ranger station, somewhere in the North Carolina section of the trail. Alex was 24, earnest and scared, exactly as I'd been when I first encountered the rules. "Tell me what happened," I said. They told me about a particularly bad season. 8 disappearances in 4 months, including a 12-year-old boy who'd wandered away from his family's campsite and never been found. The search had gone on for weeks. The media coverage had been intense. The family's grief had been unbearable to witness. And then, one night while Alex was alone at their station, a woman in a purple fleece jacket had appeared and offered them a choice. She said, "If I take the deal, me and 2 other rangers who've agreed, we'll prevent disappearances for the next decade," Alex said. "A decade. That's potentially hundreds of lives saved. How can I say no to that?" "Because it's a lie," I said gently, "or at least, it's not the whole truth. Yes, willing sacrifices reduce disappearances. But they're not the only way to do that. And the cost, Alex, the cost isn't just your life, it's your humanity, your identity, everything that makes you you." "But those people who died would have died anyway," I interrupted. "Maybe not all of them, but some of them, because that's the nature of wilderness. People make mistakes, they take risks, they ignore warnings. And yes, sometimes entities that exist beyond our understanding take them. But you can't prevent all of it. You can only do your best to minimize it." Jennifer's research, I know Jennifer's research, I helped compile it. And yes, it shows that refusing the deal can work. But Alex, I need to be honest with you. It also shows that refusal comes with risks. Some rangers who say no end up dead anyway. Some of them suffer first. The entities don't like being denied. Alex's face went pale. So I'm damned either way. No, I said firmly. You're choosing between two difficult paths. One where you sacrifice yourself and maybe save some lives at the cost of your humanity. One where you refuse and fight to protect people through human means, knowing you can't save everyone. Which would you choose? I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Frank, about all the rangers who'd taken the deal over the years, about the people who'd disappeared despite all our efforts. I'd refuse, I finally said. I did refuse, back in 1995, and I've spent 30 years wondering if I made the right choice. But Alex, here's what I've learned. The entities want us to think in binary terms. Take the deal or watch people die. But reality is more complex than that. We have more options than they want us to believe. You can refuse the deal and increase patrols. You can educate hikers more thoroughly. You can restrict access to the most dangerous areas during high-risk times. You can build a support network with other rangers, share information, develop new strategies for keeping people safe. You can live and fight rather than dying, or whatever happens when you take the deal, and hoping it was enough. But I can't save everyone. No, you can't, and that's the hardest lesson of all. But you can save yourself, and that matters too. Alex sat with that for a while, stirring their coffee absently. Finally, they looked up at me. What happened to the people from your season? The ones who disappeared? I don't know, I admitted. I think about them sometimes. Jennifer Page with her pink-laced boots, Tom Brennan, the retired teacher, all the others whose names I learned from their families. I don't know if they suffered. I don't know if they still exist in some form, trapped in whatever space the entities inhabit. I don't know if they would have lived if I'd taken the deal, but I know that I'm still here, still human, still able to help people, to make a difference, to fight against the darkness in whatever way I can. And I think that's worth something. Did you ever see them again, the white figures? Once, I said. 10 years ago, I went back to Virginia. I hiked to the spot where I'd seen them that night with David Lee. It was midday, sunny, beautiful, and there was one of them standing at the edge of the clearing, just one in broad daylight, which I'd never heard of happening before. It didn't approach me, didn't threaten me, it just stood there, watching, and I realized it was showing me something, that it remembered me, that refusing the deal had consequences beyond the immediate. I was marked in some way. They would always know me. That's terrifying. It is. But it's also proof that our choices matter, that we're not powerless. Even entities beyond our understanding have to respect our agency, our ability to say no. Alex nodded slowly. I think I know what I'm going to do. Whatever you decide, I said, make sure it's your decision. Not guilt, not pressure, not manipulation from beings that don't think like we do. Your choice. We talked for another hour, and when we parted ways, I felt cautiously hopeful. Alex was smart, thoughtful, and they had resources we'd never had back in 1995. They had Jennifer's research, our network of rangers, decades of accumulated knowledge about how to survive and resist in thin places. The next generation was going to be okay. Better than okay, but the fight wasn't over. 3 days after I met with Alex, I got a message through our network's encrypted chat. It was from Marcus. He was still ranging in Virginia, now in his 70s, too stubborn to retire. Something's changing, the message read. The entities are more active than I've seen in years. More aggressive, like they know their time is running out, and they're making a last push. Be careful. I wasn't surprised. In ecological systems, organisms often have extinction bursts, a final surge of activity before population collapse. If the entities really were dependent on human energy and human activity in wilderness areas was declining, they'd be desperate to harvest as much as they could before their access to that resource disappeared entirely, which meant the next few years were going to be dangerous. I started reaching out to the rangers in our network, warning them, reminding them of the protocols we'd developed. Don't negotiate with the entities, don't make deals, support each other, document everything. Survive. And I started thinking about my own legacy. I'm 55 now. I've been a ranger for almost 30 years. worked in some of the most remote and beautiful places in America. I've seen things that most people can't imagine, dealt with threats that have no names in our languages. I've also helped develop strategies that have saved lives. I've mentored young rangers. I've contributed to Jennifer's research. I've refused to feed a system that consumes human souls and calls it balance. If I die tomorrow, from natural causes or accidents, or the entities finally deciding to retaliate for my decades of refusal, I'll die human. That's worth something. But I'd prefer not to die tomorrow. I'd prefer to see this through, to witness the day when the boundaries stabilize enough that the rules are no longer necessary, when hikers can walk the Appalachian Trail without fear of mysterious disappearances, when rangers don't have to choose between their humanity and the lives of strangers. I think that day is coming. Maybe not in my lifetime, but soon. Until then, I keep working. I keep warning people. I keep refusing deals and fighting to survive the consequences of that refusal. And I keep telling the story. That's why I'm writing this, really. Not to scare you, though if it scares you away from making stupid decisions in the wilderness, that's a bonus. But to document what I've learned, to add my voice to Jennifer's database, to the accumulated knowledge of rangers who've worked in thin places and lived to tell about it. Because here's what I want you to understand. The rules exist for a reason. They're not superstition or folklore or campfire stories designed to spook people. They're survival strategies developed over generations by people who've had to share space with beings we don't fully understand. Follow them, please. Don't follow music in the woods after 10 p.m. Don't acknowledge the white hikers. Pay attention to warnings from birds and boots and glowing trail markers. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. But also understand that the rules aren't absolute. They're not magic spells that guarantee safety. They're guidelines that reduce risk, and when you inevitably encounter a situation the rules don't cover, use your judgment. Be smart. Be cautious. Be prepared to run. And if you're ever offered a deal, if some entity in whatever form offers you a choice between sacrifice and safety, between your humanity and someone else's life, know that you have more options than they're telling you. Know that refusing is possible. Know that fighting is possible. Know that survival is possible. You don't have to become a monster to fight monsters. I learned that the hard way, over 30 years of mistakes and small victories and losses that still haunt me. But I learned it, and I'm still here, still fighting, still human. Frank made a different choice. He believed the only way to protect people was to stop being one of them. And maybe in his specific situation, with his specific information, that was the right choice for him. I can't judge that. But I can offer an alternative path. I can show that resistance is possible, that you can say no to beings of immense power and survive the consequences. That human courage and human stubbornness and human solidarity can prevail against things that seem unstoppable. Will you die? Maybe. The entities don't appreciate defiance. They retaliate. They push back. But you might also live. And if you live, you can keep fighting. You can protect more people than you ever could by sacrificing yourself. You can help build a world where these choices aren't necessary anymore. That's the future I'm working toward. That's the legacy I want to leave. And that's why I'm telling you this story now. Because in 2024, almost 30 years after that terrible season in 1995, the battle is still ongoing. The entities are still out there. Rangers are still being offered deals. People are still disappearing from America's wilderness areas. But we're winning. Slowly, gradually, but we're winning. The disappearances are down. The entity's power is waning. The boundaries are stabilizing. And the next generation of rangers, people like Alex Martinez, they have knowledge we never had. They have networks and research and documented strategies for survival. They don't have to figure this out alone in the dark like I did. So if you're reading this because you're a hiker planning to walk the Appalachian Trail, be safe, follow the rules, trust your instincts, and know that there are rangers out there who've dedicated their lives to protecting you, even from threats they can't fully explain. If you're reading this because you're a ranger working in a thin place, you're not alone. There are others like you, fighting the same fight. We've built a network, developed strategies, accumulated knowledge. Reach out, connect. We'll help you survive this. And if you're reading this because you've been offered the deal, think carefully before you accept. Consider all your options. Remember that the entities need you more than you need them. Remember that you have power, even when you feel helpless. And remember Frank. Remember that he thought sacrifice was the only way. That he gave up everything he was to protect people he'd never meet. Honor his choice by making sure it was really necessary. Honor it by proving there are other ways. That's all any of us can do, really. Make our choices, live with the consequences, and try to leave the world a little better than we found it. Even when the world includes things that shouldn't exist, operating by rules we don't understand, in places where reality bends and breaks. Especially then. So yeah, I'm a park ranger. I worked the Appalachian Trail in 1995. I learned about the forbidden rule, never acknowledged the hikers who wear all white after sunset, and all the other rules that help humans survive in places where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. I've spent 3 decades living with the consequences of refusing to sacrifice my humanity to protect strangers. 3 decades of guilt and doubt and small victories and terrible losses. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd make the same choice. Because I'm still here. Still human, still fighting, and that matters. The mountains are old, the entities are older, but humanity is resilient. We adapt, we survive. We find ways to thrive even in the presence of things that want to consume us. We're going to win this. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. We just have to hold on long enough. Stay safe out there. Follow the rules, trust yourself, and never ever let them convince you that sacrifice is the only option. There's always another way. You just have to be brave enough to find it. That's the real lesson I learned on the Appalachian Trail in 1995, and it's taken me 30 years to understand it fully. But I understand it now, and I hope you do too.